Welcome to a new episode of the Superpowered Fancast. This is Darren. This week I had the pleasure of interviewing actor Eric Goins. Mr. Goins currently stars as the Gambler, one of the members of the Injustice Society of America on the CW DC Universe series Stargirl. Now, we talked about his acting journey, character development, the things he enjoys about his character, some things he in a conversation he had with Jeff Johns, how he developed the character of the Gambler for the series. I really want to thank him for his time, and I appreciate him coming on. And without further ado, is my interview with Eric Goins. Eric Goins, thank you so much for being on the Fancast this week. I really want to, again, thank you again for being here. I'm a huge fan of Stargirl. I'm a huge comic book fanatic, so anything comic book related I'm into. So the first question I wanted to ask is I'm just really trying to get into like learning about character. And like I was saying before, who better to talk about character than people who have to create characters, and those are actors. So I guess the first question I would ask is like what was your acting journey like? What led you to acting and performance? Like where?
Yeah, so I worked in the corporate world for a long time. Had no inkling that I was destined for a life in performance or acting, and I went to an improv show. My friends took me to an improv comedy show in '98 for my birthday, and I watched the performers, and I just was captivated. I was so in love with what they were doing, and it looked like fun, and it looked kind of scary, which was kind of compelling in a way.
Right.
And I decided to try it. So I auditioned for class, and I got in to class, and the rest was pretty much history. About 4 years, 5 years after I started doing improv kind of regularly, like professionally, I had an opportunity to get an agent, and from that led to auditions for bigger and bigger things. In 2008, Georgia passed some tax incentives that brought a lot of work here locally to Georgia. So I ended up just being at the right place at the right time, and knowing the right people and being prepared, and the rest is history.
That's awesome. And along those lines, especially when you finally decide to get into acting, when like the performance bug hits you, like when you're going in for an interview, like for *Halt and Catch Fire* or for Stargirl, like what is kind of the process like? Like where does like what just specifically what was the audition process for *Halt and Catch Fire* like, and how was that compared to Stargirl?
Right. So most of the time, auditions are pretty consistent as far as the pattern they follow or the steps involved. Your preparation is different because you're always preparing for a different script or a different actor or a different director or a different character. For *Halt and Catch Fire*, it was a little bit longer ago, so I basically got the script. They originally brought us in to the *Halt and Catch Fire* audition, and they had us in person in front of the casting director and some of the producers, and they had us read like 3 or 4 different characters, and they were just trying to put the pieces together, because especially for the pilot, everyone was kind of like an engineer or a techie or software person, and so they were just trying to find the right combinations of people. And so you would go in, you would read for a specific character, and then you would walk out and maybe get a new script right there on the spot. And they're like, well, come back in 10 minutes and do this one. And
Right.
then you go in and do that, and you come back out and they go, well, try this one. And so they were just kind of trying to put pieces in a puzzle and see who fit best. That audition was actually in person. So I walked into a room. I auditioned for the casting director and the producers, and then they made a decision based on that. With Stargirl, I got a script that had relatively nothing to do with the project because it was a DC comic book projects, so those things are generally kind of under wraps, and they don't want any leaks, and they don't want any scripts to hit the internet. And really, just over the last few years, that's become even more of a concern. So when I did *Halt and Catch Fire*, there was less concern about scripts getting out and things like that. But with *Stargirl*, they were a little more protective of the story and the script and the character. So I got a script that had very little to do with the actual script of *Stargirl*. It was generally an audition for this business guy who was having lunch with his boss, and his boss lets him know that he's being replaced on the next big work trip, and so they want to see how you handle that.
So it's really more of like how do you act a role versus how do you create a character.
What's crazy is I've mentioned this before. So I did not, because the Gambler has a very distinct speaking pattern and a very distinct characterization of who he is. He carries himself in a very specific way. I did not present that to Jeff or the producers or anybody in the show until episode 2. So I spoke out loud. No lie. So my audition, I did not do the character because it wasn't appropriate. I had no idea what I was auditioning for. When I booked the gig, then I got a call like 30 minutes later, and it was Jeff Johns on the phone welcoming me to the show. And then he kind of gave me a rundown about the character, who it was, and where he fit in with the overall storyline. And I was like, whoa, this is kind of a big deal. I had no idea up until that point. So then when I got on set for the pilot, I'm in the pilot just really quickly at the beginning during that fight between the ISA and the JSA. I basically go to seemingly attack Starman, and he, with one fell swoop, throws me through the air, and I land on a table. And that was my stunt double. So I wasn't even, really in that. Right. So it wasn't until the second episode where I first spoke. And during the pilot, Jeff and I kind of started talking about the character and what I was thinking, and I wanted to get his input, obviously, because he's the end of the line when it comes to these stories and characters. Mm-hmm. And together we kind of collaborated and figured out who this character might be. But I never said a word in his voice until I walked on set. Out in public, at least. I did it at home, but that doesn't count. So it's kind of one of those moments where you do your first scene and you're like, you guys good? Everybody good with that? How does everybody like that voice? So fortunately, everybody liked it, and we moved on from there.
Well, along those same lines, and that's interesting, because that was going to lead into those questions, because in essence, you are in that moment kind of creating a character, because like Steve Sharp, like Gambler, he's been a comic book character since 1944, but he's never appeared on screen before.
Right.
So you have the unique ability, like, how other actors, when they play a comic book character, they've got either the history of someone else's interpretation that they have to throw away, or they kind of have the decades of who people kind of believe this character is. But you got the unique ability to kind of create this character with Jeff Johns, but still kind of interpret it your own way. So,
yeah.
What about the character did you find, just in those conversations with Jeff, did you find, like, did you find the character in those conversations?
So Jeff spoke to me about the Gambler, and the first thing he said to me was, listen, and it makes sense, all the other ISA members, I think we know enough now that they all have children, right? So Icicle has a son, and he states in the show, he says, it's time to make a better place for our children. Mm-hmm. And he makes that promise to his wife at the beginning of the show. And so everything he does is delivering on that promise. And then he pulls in the other ISA who have similar driving principles, because they have children, right? They want at least a place where their children will be safe and get to impose themselves in any way they want in society. The Gambler doesn't have that. He has no children that we know of. And so, he does in the comic books, but in this show, he does not have any children. And so that makes him particularly problematic to everybody, because he's not being driven by any sense of familial responsibility or even like empathy at all. He is in it just for greed and personal gain. And that makes him sociopathic. Like, He's completely in it for himself. And that, in Jeff's terms, was he's the villain amongst the villains, is what he told me. And so what I took that to interpret as is the gambler will do whatever he needs to do right now in the present to get what he hopes to get in the future. And so that makes him manipulative. And when I think about someone who's manipulative, and he's a gambler, right? So he is a gambler is trained to misdirect his facial expressions to what his intentions are, right? So you don't want to have a tell at all, right? And so when you take that to the extreme and say, okay, so the gambler can't have any tells. As a matter of fact, if you played him really like without any type of emotion, then it's kind of a boring thing to watch. But if you play the opposite of that and say, not only is he not going to have a tell, but he's going to be almost the opposite of what's going on in his head.
Right.
That makes him more dangerous. And so the audience sees that kind of character and they go, okay, he's kind of smiling a little bit, but he's a bad guy. What? It's almost like he's like, you know, hey, everything's great. I'm here to help. And then he stabs you, right? And you're like, where did that come from? I didn't see it coming at all, which makes him extremely dangerous.
Right. And that's one of the things that I, just watching the series, I can see in your performance. It's like, just like one of the last episodes I saw where he's just walking in and Sportsmaster and Tigress is in there. And he drops a bag of peanuts and they tell him to pick it up. And it's just that every time I see the character on screen and I see that smile, it's almost like you never know what he's going to do next or what he's thinking. And you're absolutely right about there not being a tell, because because the only tell you can kind of get is that there is something dangerous behind his eyes. There's something dangerous, and because you don't know what he's about to do next, you can't plan for it.
Right.
You're gonna have to wait.
And what I thought was really interesting about that scene with Tigress and Sportsmaster was he threw it on the ground, but it was right next to a garbage can.
Right.
So that's intentional. Like he literally did it intentionally to get a rise out of people, which is, if you read the comic books, that's how the Green Lantern, they first meet, is he's standing right next to his wanted poster. And he's doing that to get a rise out of people. And I find that particularly devious. And so that's it's really supported by the Stargirl script, because he sees the garbage can and he throws it right next to it, which is just getting a rise. It's intentional.
But it's also part of being a gambler. It's taking that chance. It's taking that risk and playing out the probabilities of what can happen in return.
Right. And then also taking the results of that and using it to calculate the people around him. So obviously when Tigress makes that comment, she's pretty disdained at the gambler. The way she delivers that line, you could tell she doesn't like him a whole lot,
right.
which tells him where he stands with everyone. And I think that's what a true gambler is always doing. They're trying to figure out where they stand within the greater circle of influence that they're surrounded by, so they can make the appropriate decisions when they move forward.
Right.
And the other characters have like, they have super strength, or they can, create, Icicle creates ice and cold, and Brainwave has his telepathic powers. You can go on. The gambler has none of that. He has a Derringer, and that's it as of right now. And so he only has his mind and his charisma to get him through things. And
that's almost one of the things that makes him more dangerous.
Agreed.
Is that he doesn't have powers, but he has the ability to manipulate the people that do.
Which is why I think it was brilliant that the writers made him like a hacker and a tech genius, because that really does fall right in line with who he is. Like he is super dangerous, because it's crazy, but like having access to information and being a hacker is almost as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than physical abilities, especially in today's where, mining information is more valuable than gold, they say. And so having information on people really is the ultimate power. And he's not letting anybody know.
Yeah,
Go on.
it's one thing to rob a bank. It's another thing to be able to rob 20 banks at the same time and
Totally.
and bounce the information off like 20 different, through 20 countries.
I love that scene where they come in the first time you see me in front of all my monitors.
Yeah.
And there's a poker game going, like a video poker game going on. There's a football game going on over here. I'm doing stuff in front of me. Like, it's really cool that he's multitasking all these things, which shows his level of intelligence.
Yeah, because it shows not only that he's incredibly smart, but also that the constant challenge of something is one of the things that's keeping him going. And that's again another really interesting motivation, like character-wise, because it's like, again, like they have, like the other characters have to, focus on kids and kind of maintaining the facade of being, upstanding members of society and citizens like that. And Gambler gets to kind of go into another place and be the person that he really is.
Yeah, and I think his guiding principle is, at least in his perception, he always has more information than everybody else around him. He knows something that no one else knows. At least he perceives it that way, which allows him to sit back and smile and not be threatened by anything, because he knows something you don't, which makes him super dangerous.
Right. So were you a comic book fan, like before taking the Stargirl gig? Like, what if you were a fan, like what kind of comics did you read?
So I love comics. I love anything superhero. I don't have a ton of comic books to my collection. I really like graphic novels. If I talk about the comics that I enjoy, it would be The Flash. The Flash is kind of like one of my top things of all times. I grew up watching like George Reeves Superman and Adam West Batman. I used to watch the old Shazam television show. I mean, like classic comic book shows. So those are the ones that I grew up watching. I pretty much love anything superhero related. I'll watch anything. Like, someone asked me the other day, well, what do you think about all these Batmans that are coming out next year? And, Michael Keaton and Robert Pattinson and Ben Affleck might even be thrown in there. And I was like, that's awesome. It's more content. Right. I'll take it. I'll take all the content I can get. That gives me 3 different Batmans to watch.
Right.
I'm good. Like, that's awesome. I can't wait.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, you can, especially from what they're talking about, kind of doing Flashpoint, is that you have that ability to just, and even, I guess but for the CW and the DC Universe shows, like the whole Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover, that kind of recreated the multiverse that Stargirl exists in. Like, you have that ability to just have all of these stories happening at once, and one doesn't have to take away from the other, and you can enjoy all of them at the same time.
It's a really, really cool storytelling convention that they're using. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, because it's not limiting. Like, you can have as many different types of stories on as many different Earths as you want to, and that's one of the things I'm enjoying about Stargirl is I love the old JSA. Like, I love I know we've had the Stephen Amell version of Green Arrow, but now we have, like, there's a Green Arrow in the JSA. Like, we had like, we still haven't had a Arrowverse Green Lantern yet, but there's there was the Alan Scott was in the JSA, so that there's always that possibility of having those characters,
and that's what makes it fun.
Yeah, and you don't have to explain it. It doesn't have to be one of those things where where you're having to deal with the Arrowverse type thing. You just say, well, this world, they exist.
Yeah, like there's a pink pin sitting in Courtney's room.
Right.
Throughout this whole season, there's a pink pin in it, and we presented it, but then I kind of forgot about it, but it's there.
Right.
And it's waiting to be used whenever they choose. And that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Those are some great, like, storytelling premises is just say, hey, you know what? Everything's on the table here. And I think that's one of the reasons why I enjoyed Stargirl so much. And one of the reasons why I enjoy your character so much is, again, like what we were talking about, is that you've got characters who have who you know are evil. You know they're the bad guy. And you know the gambler's the bad guy. But at the same time, there's just something interesting about him in the fact that you just don't know what he's planning or what he's about to do next.
I think what's interesting about Stargirl is the bad guys, in some way, shape, or form, are likable.
Yeah.
Like Neil as Icicle, who's doing horrible things, he is just likable. Like, yeah. And then you sit back and you go, well, he loves his son. Like the last episode, the one we just watched, 10, where he's in the office and he walks in on Amy Smart and Luke Wilson, and they're in her office, and he walks in with his parents. He seems so like charismatic and kind and charming, and I thought that was such an interesting choice, because it's like he's really likable. If he weren't killing or trying to kill everybody, he would be a wonderful guy to hang out with. And I think that's really cool how Stargirl has done that. And so I think Gambler fits into that in his own way. In a way, he's likable because he's kind of interesting, and he kind of seems harmless, but you know he's not. You just don't know how you feel about this guy, but he's a fun guy. And so I think it's interesting how they've done that.
Yeah, and that's along those same lines. It seems like the overarching plan of the villains is to do something to improve the world in their interpretation. And I think that's
right.
Well, they're not trying to take over the world or turn it into a dystopia. They're trying to improve the world based on their interpretation of how the world should be improved. And that's what clashes with the heroes in it. So that, which is an interesting story point, because they're not trying to do, they're not in their mind. And I guess it goes back to what, a lot of people have said about the villain. Every villain feels they're the hero of their own story.
Everyone does. That's right. Everybody believes they're the hero in their own story.
Right. So they're, in essence, they believe they're doing the right thing, and that, invariably they're doing the right thing in the wrong way.
Right.
In essence.
I think that's what makes them a little likable. It's kind of like, well, it's kind of like, in a way, it's kind of like that Breaking Bad theme, right? Like, it's like he's doing horrible things, but he's doing it so his son has a better life. And it's that classic question, like, are bad things acceptable to get a very good result?
Right.
And that's a big question.
Yeah. It's do the ends justify the means?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and just on that same level, just because you're a fan of like that content, is there like a comic book hero or villain you would like to play, like other than Gambler? Like, if you, like, just from your interpretation, is there like a character you think, I could do that either in live action or voiceover?
Good question. I mean, if I weren't like character typing myself, like, so like if because Superman has a look and feel to him, and so does the Flash, like, I'm a stocky guy, so nobody would believe I'm the fastest guy on earth. But if like typecasting were a thing, I think Flash to me is one of my favorite characters, and I think that would be so cool.
Yeah.
To play that person.
Yeah, I mean, that would be awesome. Like, I've always, I love so many different kind of types of characters that I don't like to. I would never want to limit myself. So I would, I could, as much as I love Jon Stewart as Green Lantern, I love Hal Jordan. Like, if there were no like typecasting involved, I think anybody could play Hal Jordan. But
agreed.
But
agreed.
You're absolutely right. Well, sort of just back to like character creation, like when you're creating a character, what kind of one of the things that attract you to a character in the first place, and then when you like how I guess how is the process of discovering what a character is? What is that like?
Well, whenever the first thing, the process for me, I think every actor probably has his or her own process. The process for me is, the first thing I do is I read through the script, and I try to identify how I connect, like what things about me do I bring to this character. So every character that I present has to be rooted in Eric, in me. So if I don't have something, then I can't share it in an authentic way. I mean, that's literally the definition of sharing I have to own it before I can give it away, and that's sharing. Otherwise it's theft, right? And it's not authentic. And so I have to find some truth for myself in the character, and then I have to understand how to bring that and shape that into the character when I create it. And so I've done 20 years of improv, and essentially 20 years of developing characters in front of a live audience, sometimes on the spot. Right. And then other times as I have a little bit of preparation and I'm like, oh, I want to work on a new character this week, and maybe I'll find a reason to bring him to the stage. And so I have a pretty good toolbox of characters that I've already developed that I know were founded in me, right? And so I think the things that were really compelling to me about The Gambler is I love comedy, right? I love it, and I've been doing it for 20 plus years, and my style of comedy is a little self-deprecating, but it's a lot of like, there's a little devil on my shoulder, right? Like it's a little bit of like, gotcha. And that feeling, that like, gotcha, I think rings very loud with The Gambler. Yeah. And so that's what was compelling to me about the character, and that's what I latched onto. I latched onto the fact that he is kind of like a kid who got his hand stuck in the cookie jar, or got caught with his hand in the cookie jar, right? Like his hand's in there, and he's like, oh, this isn't what it looks like, right? Because that's what kids do. Yeah. Like my daughter, if I catch her, she's like, oh, I was just checking to see if there were any cookies in here because I wanted you to have one, right? Like that's what my daughter would say. and so that is kind of my stylistic approach to comedy in a way. And so that's what I saw in The Gambler. I see this character who's always getting, stuck with his hand in the cookie jar, but talks his way out of it. Right. And so
he's not going to not get the cookie, but he's going to make you understand. He's going to manipulate you into thinking that it's okay for him to take it. Yeah.
And so also the fact that he's a gambler means that he's got a lot of charisma, and that he's generally charming. And so he's kind of like, if he weren't a bad guy, he would be that uncle that takes you to the state fair every year. Yeah. Right. And so I kind of relate to that. And so I think what I do when I create a character is I don't judge the character in a sense that I don't go into it going, okay, the gambler's a bad guy. Right. He's on the ISA. He's horribly dangerous. He kills people, and he's off to bad things. I don't do that. I don't judge the character. Okay. A casting director a long, long time ago gave me that advice. They said, great audition, but don't judge the character. And I was like, oh, that's a good point. And so I took that to heart. And so not judging the character allows you to find kind of like the redeeming qualities and just find the person. Because the gambler, like we were talking about, he knows he's doing bad things, but in his mind, he either doesn't care or doesn't recognize how his behaviors are affecting other people, which makes him sociopathic. He has no idea how his actions are affecting other people, or he doesn't care. Right. Either way, he's not like this mustache twirling guy going.
He could with a mustache.
He could. Yeah, he definitely could. But I think those are the compelling things that attracted me to the character, is that he's a bad guy, but he doesn't carry himself in that way. And so I try generally not to judge the character. And so that way I can because I don't do bad things. I'm just an actor who plays people who do it. So
Mhm.
that brings my humanity to it and brings elements of me. And that's always going to be an authentic performance. If I try to go, oh, okay, the gambler. There's this actor that plays a bad guy in one of the movies, and I want to do it just like he did his bad guy. Well, that's not authentic for me. That's somebody else's interpretation of a bad guy, and I'll never get there. And it just comes off as bad acting
Right.
because they're like, what is he doing? And it's because you're hiding who you are. You're trying to do an impression of somebody else's bad guy. So I have to find the truth in it for me, and then bring all those pieces forward and live in those truths, and then just apply them to the context of the script. What's funny is that it sounds so complicated, but it took me 15 years to recognize how easy it was. It's just
Right.
literally just be yourself. Just everything you have is enough. And I think that's a really cool lesson that improv particularly teaches, which is why I think kids should take improv. Every child should take improv because it teaches you that everything you bring to the table as a human being is enough. You don't have to do, and actually our differences are celebrated. Like
Mhm.
nobody wants to see an improv show with 5 people who are exactly the same. We want to see 5 people who are uniquely different. So that way that creates fun and diversity in our storytelling. And so, yeah, that's how I do it.
Okay. Well, I mean, before all of this with the quarantine and the pandemic, were you still going out and doing improv shows or?
Yeah. So I did improv at a theater here in Atlanta for 16 years, and then I stepped away in 2015 to kind of focus on my acting career. I started a business that helps support actors. I help them take their auditions. I help them with private coaching. I edit their demo reels, professional services for actors. And as a result, for about a year, I didn't do any improv, and I really started to miss it. And a friend of mine, I met my wife at my improv theater. My wife actually is an actor and an improviser as well. And she joined my theater company, the one I was at, and we performed together for 10 years. And so she and I were missing improv. And then our 2 best friends, who are also a married couple, and just so happens to be my daughter's godparents, this girl asked us to do she knew we all did improv, but we'd always done it at separate places. And she's like, have you guys ever done improv together? And we're like, no. She's like, well, I'm going to do a benefit, like a charity event. And I was wondering if you guys would just do an improv show together. We're like, yeah, that sounds like fun. So the next day we created our name, and we're called the Buskers. And we did the show, and we loved it. It was so much fun. And so we basically just moved forward from that day, and we do improv shows together. And we either do like corporate events, so like if a private company wants to come and hire us, we'll do that. But mostly what we do is we do charity events. And so if there's a cause that is looking to raise money, so like maybe a school, or we've done some really great shows for organizations that are looking to raise money for a worthy cause. So we just come in and we do a show, help them sell tickets to the show, and give them the money. And it's a really cool environment to go and do something like a live improv show for. So we end up doing a show like maybe once every 3 months or so, once every 3 or 4 months. I probably, during the pandemic, I've recognized that I need to do it more often because it really feeds my soul.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are coming up with new priorities for their lives based on the pandemic and saying, I need to do more of these things that feed me. And so I think as I move forward, I'll definitely be doing a lot more improv with our troupe, the Buskers. And but yeah, there's nothing that I've always, the way I say it is like, if you want to know who I really am, like, come see me at an improv show. Like, that's me. That's the most authentic version of me there is Eric Goins on a stage doing improv, because I'm totally free, right? I mean, when you walk through life, you have to, you kind of pivot who you are based on your circumstances, and being on stage is just the freest version of myself.
That's all. Well, and on that note, Do you have any projects coming out that were pre-pandemic that you want to talk about, or?
You know, pre-pandemic, I was hook, line, and sinker with Stargirl. I mean, I worked on that show for about 7 months, and I have very unique facial hair for that character, and it's mine. Like, so, yeah, it's real, and no, it is real, and that specific facial hair, it's a tough thing to sell for another role. I mean, there aren't too many other roles that they're like, oh yeah, this works for this guy too. So I was pretty tied into that, which I was more than happy to be. It was such a great experience. But like, so most of my work over the year was with Stargirl. Somehow I worked in an episode of Cobra Kai, and I believe it must have been after we got done shooting, because I certainly didn't have that facial hair. But other than that, Stargirl is pretty much the majority of my work for last year and most of the stuff that's airing this year.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, I'm enjoying it. I know a lot of people are, and I love the fact that it's been renewed for another season. So I'm looking forward to the end of this season and how it rolls into the next. But Eric, like, if you wanted anybody to follow you online, like where can they follow you? Like, how can they find you?
My website is ericgoins.com, and then my Instagram handle, is that right? My handle? My Instagram handle? Yeah, I think that is _Eric, ERIC _Goins, GOINS. So _Eric_Goins is my Instagram. That's probably the best place to find me.
Gotcha. So, are you on Twitter at all, or?
Oh yeah, thank you. I'm on Twitter as the Eric Goins.
All right.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. That's not true. I'm on Twitter as Eric L. Goins.
Okay.
I'm awful.
Oh no, that's fine. There's gonna be links on this episode, so people will be able to.
Yeah, my Twitter is Eric L. Goins.
All right. That's awesome. Well, Eric, thank you again so much for being on the show and talking about Stargirl. And I would love to, I would love to talk to you again, like after the season ends, just kind of recap the series as a whole. And if you have anything else you want to talk about, I would love to as well.
Yeah, I'd love to connect after the show. That'd be great. I'd love to do it. And I really appreciate you doing this. I mean, I think one of the best parts of the show, the thing that I never anticipated was this incredible community of people who support these types of stories and this type of storytelling. And it is so cool to meet people like you and other people who are doing stuff like this. And really the success of in my opinion, the entire genre is really tied to people like you and other fans that support the shows. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's the thing, we've been wanting this for so long, and we finally, like, the technology has caught up to the fandom. So we're enjoying it as much as we can. And if we're unable to make it, then we're happy to talk about it.
That's right.
and we've lost the stigma of being nerds for it, so that's even better.
Amen.
Well, thank you again, Eric, and so I'll have links up to where people can find you, and congratulations on the show, and I hope to talk to you again.
Thanks. I look forward to it.
Once again, I want to thank Eric Goins for being on the Fancast this week. It was a great conversation. I really appreciate his time. There are going to be links to where you can find Eric online. He has a Twitter account, his Instagram account. He has his own website, ericgoins.com. But as always, you can find me and latest news and reviews and interviews on superpoweredfancast.com. You can also contact me and send me an email, superpoweredfancast@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter @superpoweredfan. Until next time, this is Darren for Superpowered Fancast, signing off.